Hello, everybody. I see a full house here. Obviously, this topic is super interesting about testing of UI5. We heard about creating controls, generating controls, extending control, and now it's all about testing. And today here we have Simon with us. Simon is a senior developer at j&s-soft. Are you guys having fun at the conference? So thanks to the sponsor, j&s-soft. And Simon has done a lot of things like freestyle, UI5, Fiori elements, flexible programming model, and so on and so forth. But what I want to highlight, one fun fact about him, is that he was once so crazy hiked 100 kilometers in 24 hours. So fun fact about him, also for you later on if you want to network with him, talk about that experience, right? So today, Simon is going to share with us about testing in UI5 in 2024. I'm passing it to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So originally, when I planned this presentation, I wanted to tell you how important testing is, how it's another safety net. But during the day, there was other session earlier from Volker and Marianne, and they shared some results of a survey they took. And after I saw that, I had to steal one slide from them. And let's have a look at that again. And I just want to quote Volker again, what he told earlier: screw you guys. So there's a huge problem we have to address here, and I hope we can start solving this today. And I want to do also a quick poll survey with you today. So please raise your hand when you already develop unit tests on a regular basis. Okay, good. Then OPA5 tests. Okay, a little bit less. And VDI5 or in general end-to-end testing. Okay, even less. Another question for you maybe, do you know the UI5 test recorder? Okay, oh, more than I expected. And the last question is, do you know the Fiori elements test library 4? 4 people, okay, we have to do something here. Why did I, or another thing why I wanted to present you the testing of UI5 in 2024 is because I think there was a little bit of a focus switch in the last UI5 cons. In the last UI5 cons, there was the new tool, the new end-to-end test tool, VDI5, which was introduced. But this is only a small portion of the whole test library we want to tackle. When we look here, the test library, the foundation, should be always at the bottom. We should test as much as possible on the lower levels, and only at the higher levels we see there's VDI5. So VDI5 is on our testing library, only a very small portion. We start with unit tests. For that, we will use QUnit. Then we move over to OPA5 for our integration tests. And at the top, for the end-to-end tests, or also called system and scenario tests, VDI5. Maybe some more explanation here. In the unit test level, we try to do functional testing. We try to test our custom controls where everything is mocked away. We try to test with less dependencies as possible. With OPA5, we automate our application that we can really interact with it, but there is a mock server in between. So we test with mock data, not with the real backend. With VDI5 at the top for our end-to-end tests, nothing is mocked, everything is real, deployed at some test system and so on. What are system and scenario tests? System tests are for the application where we test the whole system. Scenario tests goes a step further, where we try to test whole scenarios, probably across multiple applications at once. Maybe we start with a non-UI5 application, then go through a process with multiple different applications, for example. Okay, this was the only slide we will see today. The rest will be in the code. So, is this big enough for you? No, never. I hope I don't. It's a trap. My eyes. Okay, We are using the walkthrough application with TypeScript. So when you go to the SAP UI5 demo kit, there's a tutorial with walkthrough where you develop a TypeScript application. Let's have a quick look here. So more or less, this is a standard application. I did some modifications. For example, we are not using the old mock server. We are using the new mock server v4 for the walkthrough tutorial, because this is also working with OData v2 applications. And I have prepared, or during the tutorial, you also prepare some integration and unit tests. The general setup is already here. We will not go into detail here. Now let's start with the unit tests. The unit tests are structured, or is a more or less map of your productive coding. So if you want to test your custom control, for example, we have a product writing custom control. Under unit, you would also create a folder control, and inside of that, you would write your unit test for the product writing. If you have a formatter under model, formatter, oh, sorry, my laptop wants to stay in dark mode. We have a formatter. When we want to test this, we will also create a model folder, and under that, we will write our formatter tests. So let's maybe start with a very basic formatter test. We want to test the status text function. Let's have a look at that. It's pretty basic. Depending on the property status we are getting in, we want to get a translated text for that. Let's have a look, but here on the right, we have some dependency to the getOwner component, getModel, and this is returning the resource bundle. So for our test that it is independent, we have to first of all mock that away. I have, prepared that already. So first of all, we are loading the resource model, that we have that already here. And then we create a controller mock, which more or less, puts the controller away with a very simple mock. getOwner component directly returns the getModel, which then returns my resource model. And with that, we have the basic arrangements done, and we can actually execute our status text function. So, or not really done, we have to first of all assign this controller mock to our formatter. How can we do that? Let's assign a variable status text, and then our formatter status text, we will bind the controller mock here. With that, the dependency on more or less is away, or we have mocked it, and now we can actually execute or test our status text formatter function. And I will act and assert this in one step. I want to strictly equal my status text formatter. I will pass, for example, A in it. And I knew the translated text for that I have looked up in the I18N should be new. And then we can also have a success message. The long text should be new. Okay, we have written our first test. We have mocked some dependencies away, we executed, and we asserted. How can we now look at this exactly? We have a look at the unit test QUnit HTML. So I have a running web server already. We go to the test folder, to the unit test folder, and then we can execute our unit test QUnit HTML. No, there's nothing wrong. This is intended. Because when we look here, this is about our second test we will implement in a second, about our custom control. But our first test, where we try to test the status text, or at least a portion of that, is green. That's great. And what you have also seen, this was super fast. So unit tests on the bottom layer, you can write a lot of these tests, and they will also execute very fast. So when you run them in a CI environment, they also execute very fast. The higher you get in this test library with OPA5, VDI5, the fragile your tests can get, and also the longer it takes the test to run through. So please remember that. Now, I already told you we have here another test we want to write about the product writing. This is a custom control. Let's have a look at the custom control. It's on the detail page. And it's more or less, yeah, a combination of rating indicator, label, and a button. I can rate something here and then really submit it. Thank you, this was submitted. This is a great, first of all, UI test, but you can and should also do this, test this on the unit test level. What can we test here? For example, we have a look at the product rating, maybe at the top. We see we have some aggregations. And we have, for example, a new event we will introduce with this custom control, the change event. This will be fired when I press on the submit button. And I want to test that when I press on the submit button, that this event is really fired. And probably I can also test that it is fired with the right parameters. So also a very useful thing you can do with unit tests or with QUnit. I already created or added also the resource model here because when we look at the function, this is a private function submit, we see again we have some dependencies here we need to sub away. Then we have some aggregations, it's setting some things, and at the end it's firing the event. But we do not really care what this onSubmit in the end really does. We only have to be sure that we mark this dependency away. Okay, let's do that as well. Oops. First of all, we have to arrange a few things. We have to create the control, we have to place it somewhere in the DOM, and we have to render it. How can we do that? Product rating, new product rating. We have created a control. Now we want to place it in the DOM. We want the product rating to place it, and there's a really cool, let's say, predefined DOM element from QUnit fixture, which will be cleaned up after every test, so we can easily place it there. And before we actually interact with this control, we have to render it. How can we render it? We don't want to do any timeouts, things like that. This is also not very easy with UI5 or QUnit. We can just use a function next UI update. Where is this coming from? This is coming from, where is it? Here. Sub UI QUnit utils next UI update. And you will also see here I currently expect the TypeScript transpiler to expect an error because the TypeScript types are not perfect yet with QUnit. Also, there are different things. So this is an unknown import. We will see, if I remove that, he cannot find a module, but actually we can really load it. And we will see that a couple of times in this repository that I just use this, that I don't get any compiler issues here, or TypeScript transpile errors. So we have placed it, and we render it. Now we want to act on it. And we have seen there's a submit function, a private function we could directly call. But we will not do that. We have to be very careful when we write automated tests that we write always tests in the way how an end user would interact with the application. What would an end user do with this custom control? He would click on the rate button. He would never call the private onSubmit function. And for that, to simulate such key down enter things, there's also a QUnit utils thing. This is not documented very well. There are only a few code examples, so maybe someone at SAP could document this because it's really hard to figure these things out. And we can trigger a key down here, key down, and we have to pass here two parameters. The first one is the DOM reference. And the DOM reference of the button. The button is aggregation, so we can do a little thing. I expect, as we are in TypeScript, we get a button, or what was it, from product rating, we want to get the aggregation button. So we get the button, and from this button, we want to get the DOM reference. Okay, there's something wrong. Maybe let's... Thank you. But we can also make it maybe a little bit more readable. Let's get this button that way, and then button get DOM ref. Now everything is fine. And now we can decide what we should trigger. We trigger here a key down. In my example, we can use then the key codes, another import. Hey, we have TypeScript support at least for that. And we can use enter. So we are here really simulating an enter on this rate button. We are not calling any private functions, which is very important. Now, what do we wanted to check? We wanted to check that the change event is fired. How do we check that? And for that, we can use sign-in, which is also coming directly with the UI5 distribution, where we can attach a spy to that. How does this look like? We will create a change spy from sign-in, and we will attach this to the change event from the product rating. So product rating attach change, and we will attach the spy to that. And at the end, then we can really assert that the spy has called, and we could potentially also test that the spy has been called with the right parameters. For now, we will only assert that the spy has been at least called. We could also check that it was only called once and then have an error test if it had called twice. But this is not important right now. Oops, called. Okay, we have created our custom control. We attached the spy, we placed it, we attached the spy to the change event. We want to render it. We want the button that we can really click on it. And now I told you we still have to mock this resource model away. And we can do that again with the help of sign-in. And we can do now a so-called stub. I know this is a lot of things, but due to time constraints, I have to do this a little bit faster. If you are interested in stubbing, spying things away, you can also have a look at the sign-in documentation. So what we do now is we stub the get model function away, and we expect for this test that it will always return the resource model I have loaded. Okay, and with that, if I did nothing wrong, we can go back to the browser, to my test. No, it's away. Reload it, and it didn't work. Get DOM ref. I had some issue here. Let's have a look quickly in the test button. Product rating, get aggregation. There should be an underscore. And now it's working. And remember, we have tested some functionality. We have tested custom controls, and this on the lowest level yet. Unit tests. Now let's move on to the OPA5 tests. And I think I have to be a little bit faster, but I want to tell you so much. Let's go back to the integration test. I have already prepared here as well a default journey. So in OPA5, we create so-called journey files where we describe more or less in a readable way what we want to do in our journey. Here we have a basic navigation journey. You could have a journey where you create an object. So you, on the list report, navigate to the object page, create something, assert that this is created, things like that. We also use here the page object pattern. So of course, we have to somehow identify our controls in a programmatic way and then somehow interact with that. And that we don't have to do this all the time in all our different journey files. We can store this information in so-called page object files where the actual identification and the actual assertion is happening. In the OPA5 case, we see here the pattern this wait for. This will introduce or start, let's say, a new process where we want to identify something, and we can also directly say, hey, we want to press on something, or we can also use enter text. And here again, please remember to use the press function or just for clarity, there's also this enter text. Please use these actions. Don't use any internal functions, fire press, set value, things like that. I will try to show you also one example where this is really important. And then you have a lot of different selectors, how you can identify your control, and you have also a lot of matchers together, how you really can find these things. There's also a documentation about that in the so-called API for that, record replay API. You have the ID, view name, control type, binding path, but that's not all. You also have all kinds of matchers here. You can have a look at. It takes some time to get to know these, how you can combine them to identify your control. But it gets easier from time to time. The easiest way is always when you have a stable ID for a control, of course. Then it's easy. You will try to find it via the stable ID, press on it, everything is good. Do I have a good example for the other one? No. But it gets more complicated, for example, when you would want to interact with a specific row in a table which don't have a stable ID. And then, yes, you can identify them, but it takes a lot of time to find the right selector. And for that, there is the UI5 test recorder we can use. And I will quickly open that up. And it is available with every UI5 application. It's directly in UI5 itself. There is a cumbersome shortcut for that. You have to press Shift Control Option T on Mac or Shift Control Command T, I don't know on Windows. But then you get this test recorder, and this is really, really helpful. I really recommend you this tool. On the left side, we will see the application tree with all its control. In the middle side, we will see the generated code that we get with the test recorder, and on the right side, we get additional properties about our selected control. And now, what we could do or can do, we could say, hey, I want to identify this button, say hello. I can now open the context menu with right click, and I have three options. I just want to identify it, highlight. I just want to press on it, or I want to enter text. I want to press on it, and ta-da, we have a snippet generated for us, which we could more or less just copy and paste inside of our page object and use it there. Very cool. And this tool also helps us with assertions. For example, I write a test, I will close this for now, where I navigate to the detail page. Now I want to assert something. What should I assert here? Yeah, maybe this, what is this? Let's have a look again. This object header. I have already identified it, that's great, but only identifying the object header isn't a really good assertion. Probably, when you navigate to the detail page, there will be always an object header, but the really relevant things is that the data inside of the object header is correctly. Like, we have navigated with the entry to the detail page of milk. We want to assert that milk is in the header. On the right side, we see the properties, also the title milk. We can press on it, and we get also some kind of assertions generated. So this is also possible with this test recorder, but please keep in mind this is a really helpful tool, but it is not perfect. I also use it on a daily basis, but I will just generate it and adapt it to my needs. For example, I personally don't like this binding path matcher here. It is not very readable. It's not very easy to understand. I mean, in this case, product name milk, we can still understand it, but for example, if we have a ID there, this is very hard. So what I, for example, do a lot of times, I will change this directly, and I know there is the properties matcher, and then I can say, okay, I want to find a control object header on this view with this view ID with a specific property title. I see that on the right, milk. And with this combination, I will only find this control also when this property is correct. And then I don't need to do any logic anymore here in the success function. because it wouldn't be found if this is correct. So we could here then do OPA5, assert OK, true. Yeah, milk was found. So very helpful, but not perfect. Okay, I have 10 minutes left, right? Okay. We have now talked about OPA5, how you can interact with the things. We have talked about unit tests. When we look at this repository here, probably what is missing is a Karma configuration here. And I intentionally removed the Karma configuration for that because probably you have known it. Karma is deprecated. UI5 is still supporting it, and you don't have to migrate now to anything new. But I want to give you two different tools you can use from the UI5 community. The first one is the UI5 test runner from Arnold. How can you install this? Let me close that. npm install -d for dev dependency UI5 test runner. And when you have a test suite configured, you don't have to do anything else yet and can execute this test runner. Let me quickly start the application again and copy one command. It would be UI5 test runner, and I will directly address which test suite he should open, the test runner. I will do that, and fingers crossed. Yeah. We have now, it's not so spectacular right now, but the unit tests were executed in parallel to the OPA tests. And if you know Karma, there was always the problem when you have a lot of journey files, they cannot or could not be executed in parallel. And it would take a lot of time if you have a lot of different journey files that this is working. With this test runner, you can now parallelize that. So that would drastically reduce not only on your local environment, the test execution, but also on your CI side. The second one, I will come to that in a second, because now we move to the top part of our testing parameter, to the end-to-end test with VDI5. It was already introduced by Nico that the VDI5 generator is now in the easy UI5. So in the future, it could be that there will be directly an end-to-end test folder, and you don't have to do the bootstrap manually anymore. I will do that for now. I am saying npm init VDI5 latest, and I'm passing a base URL. In the end-to-end test, of course, we don't want to test the same thing we already tested on the OPI5 level. So we really make sure on our crucial important cases of our application and also on our deployed application. Of course, yeah, this is some kind of deployed application of the walkthrough. It still uses the mock server. For this demo, it serves its purposes. We are installing that. And in a second, there should be an end-to-end test folder with a configuration file where more or less everything is pre-configured. Oh, I probably did it in the wrong directory. Yeah, let me do that quickly again so that we are in the right directory. Live demos. Yeah, end-to-end is already there. Let's have a quick look. I know I just created it with a JavaScript file, but you can also create or generate it with TypeScript. And for the default usage of VDI5, everything is pre-configured for you. So the base URL is now in here. It will start with Chrome, things like that. We also have a sample test, which is now not really defined for your specific UI5 application, but that you just get to know how VDI5 works. And we see the equivalent, how you can start to identify a control. The equivalent as this wait for from OPA5 is browser as control. And VDI5 uses the same API to identify and interact with the control as OPA5. So when we have a look at this dialect here, we can easily select VDI5, get a different skeleton, but the actual selector is the same. And also assertions work also. So there is not a huge, you don't have such a huge transition time to learn that as well. And now I want to show you the second tool you can use for a test runner instead of Karma. And this is from Maurizio. Where is he sitting? Ah, there. This guy developed this, what I will show you in a second. And come on. Am I in the right directory? Yeah. This is a WIO QUnit service, so it's also a service like VDI5 sits on top of WebDriver.io, and I have just installed it, and now we do need to do a little bit more configuration. First of all, I will move this configuration file to the test folder. Come on. I broke my PC. Okay, I am moving it, and yeah, in the configuration file, we need to add this additional service. Next to the UI5 service is now the QUnit service. And now we want this QUnit service to also execute the integration and unit tests. For that, we have to do, and I will only do it with the integration test for now, create a new file here, and let's call it integration.test.js. Quickly copy the sample as I'm running out of time. I hope it moved. It's away. Okay, let's continue just very quickly. We paste here something. We paste here that we want the results of our integration tests, OPA5 tests. Here. And then we could create in the configuration file of WDIO, we can create different suites. When we then execute this, also the QUnit service would execute not only the end-to-end test, he would also execute the unit test and the integration test when configured correctly and the configuration file is not lost. Okay. One last thing I want to show you because it's, for me, very important topic. I already said that we want to test like a real end user, but why do we want to actually do that? I have here now a different project which uses VDI5, and we are executing or writing tests for a shopping cart application. And some guy approached me and said, hey, I have written here VDI5 test, why is this not working? I'm pretty sure this is fine. And I had a look at it, and it really took me some time why the tests are failing. I will quickly execute that so that you also see VDI5 in action. And you see the first click is working, and now the second click on this accessories here is not working. And this is because of this fire press. We are not using the VDI5 API here, press, but we are telling VDI5, please identify this object list item and execute fire press on it. Now, what is the issue here? We don't do a manual click like a real end user do. We skip the whole functionality which is behind the object list item, which it would do before the fire press inside of the object list item would be called. So the selected list item is not there. There is no highlighting. There is no highlighting. So the fire press is called. We are skipping all the framework functionality of the list, of the object list item, and only execute our own code, which makes a lot of side effects. For example, this application broke down completely. When we look at the console, it's telling us the get selected, is this big enough? I hope so. The get selected item is not there, or he doesn't even find it. So with our test, we broke the application. And this is not good. So please stick always to the official APIs. There are two main interactions you would always do as an end user. You would type in something into some input fields wherever, or you click on something. Maybe there are edge cases where you drag things around and so on. Yes, but prevent of manually firing any events or also setting values, so setters in general, you have to do this very carefully. Yes, there are cases where you have to do this, but please remember or think about it if you couldn't do it in a different way. Getters are most of the time no problem, but when you are in an automated test and set some things, please be careful. I have 4 minutes, right? The last thing I want to show you, I have skipped it for now, is for Fiori Elements applications. As Fiori Elements applications are a little bit, have a special case, as most of the time you don't have any UI coding at all. So unit tests for most cases fall apart. Only the breakouts, custom extensions you have to test there. For OPA5, yes, you could test these, but if you have a native or only a Fiori Elements applications, most of the things you don't have to test because Fiori Elements, the framework itself, should test that already. If you want to be on the safe side for complex UI annotations, test the happy path, you can do that. But then there is the thing that you would have to do, identify the same controls in each and every Fiori Elements application over and over again, like a filter bar. In most Fiori Elements applications, there's a filter bar with a go button, things like that. So there was a Fiori Elements test library developed, which just gives you generic page objects you can reuse across all your Fiori Elements applications. So the whole the process of identifying these controls will be skipped. I have here one example. Let's have a quick look at the page objects. There's nothing in there, only some configuration which is relevant for the test library. But if we look at the actual tests here, these are all the generic functions you can use on the Fiori Elements test library with which you can interact with this application. And the cool thing is, if Fiori Elements change something under the hood, the test library will be also updated. So if you try to identify an element in your list, in your table, which was a text and then switch to a link, it will still work. If you would do that manually, this identifying process with a control type, this would break and you have to adapt also your tests again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's a lot of information, super interesting. And thanks for being on time so that we also have a chance to do Q&A. So now it's Q&A time. Any questions? Coming to you.
Thank you, first of all, for the session. So in your examples, you showed us the different testing scenarios and the different layers. Now, I was wondering, while you showed the different layers, the example that you used were mostly the same, like testing for the milk text in the header bar. Would you say that these kinds of tests we should repeat on every layer, sometimes with mock data and sometimes with real data? Because I'm always struggling a bit, what tests should I perform in unit test layer and what tests in integration tests? And of course, this also depends on the use case, but do you have a general recommendation there?
test as much as low on the testing pyramid, so test as much as possible on a unit test layer. If you can test a function, whatever, on the unit test level, do that. If you have already covered that on a lower layer, you don't have to test this again on a higher layer. The thing is with, so for OPA5 and QUnit, that should be clear. Now it will be complicated between the end-to-end test and the integration test. You don't want to write the same scenarios over and over again. But in the end-to-end scenario, you have a connection to the real backend. So there's nothing marked. Everything is real deployed to a test system probably. And then what you maybe want to test is the happy path. That your crucial business case is really working together with the backend. But you don't have to test each and every dialog again if it is opening, if the binding is correctly. That should be already tested on maybe the OPA5 level.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Oh, here.
Hi, thank you very much for your nice presentation. And I'm more wondering about only VDI5. I hope that's fine. And as the pyramid goes up, I mean, the scenarios get even more complicated. You deploy the application somewhere. And I'm wondering, do you think like VDI5 will get even more mature to tackle those situations, like testing on BTP, testing maybe with SAP build and work zone, if that's the right thing to do?
VDI5 can do that, or almost can do that. We have in VDI5 some issues still with work zone, for example, as it is a special case. But
yeah, that's why I'm asking, because I had those issues.
Yeah, it's probably because in work zone, when you start the application, it is loaded into an iframe and you have to switch the iframe. We are aware of that. I think we haven't released that. We have released a solution for that. Okay, we have released a solution for that, but for end-to-end test scenarios, we have also automatic authenticators. So in an end-to-end test scenario, you would probably have technical test users, and you can really log in with BTP identity provider, basic authentication, things like that. So it should be really possible to test deployed applications.
Yes, no, it is possible. I'm more asking, like, the experience was that there is not much documentation or maybe guidance around how to do it with VDI5. And I'm just asking you because maybe you have more experience. Like,
I think it would go too much to now give you concrete details. I will be here also at the beer station, so just grab a beer with me and we can talk about that.
So sorry, I need to grab the mic here. The work zone extension for VDI5 is documented. It's in a recipe on the official documentation. So are all the authentication providers. So is guidance, what to test with VDI5 and what not to test. So see, there's build work zone thingy in there. And if you, can you clear the search? And if you go to recipes, testing scope and guidance, Arnaud himself, godfather of testing, has written this. So that's worthwhile reading, I'd say.
Thank you very much. We should still have time for one more question. Any questions here? Oh.
Yeah, so in the unit test example, there was this error with sign-on. What was that about?
It's about missing types.
So you just didn't...
I ignored it. Cannot find name sign-on. Sign-on is globally available when you include it in the, not unit tests, in the integration tests. We load it somewhere. It's globally available, so he doesn't know the parameter, and I just thought, okay, for this demo, it's fine.
So it's only available global?
You can also import it directly in the test, but I guess there's also, when you try it out with TypeScript, he will probably also don't know the import.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I saw a hand raising here. I wish you have 1 minute.
Thank you for the testing awareness again. There are now 2 solutions to replace Karma. Would you say one is preferred over the other, or?
There are 2 new tools to replace Karma. UI5 itself still support Karma till they decide, for example, which will be the preferred tool. In my opinion, when you have only unit tests and integration tests in your repository and the end-to-end tests in a different repository, you can use the UI5 test runner from Arno. If you have the end-to-end tests inside of your repository and want to have a fully fledged test suite with everything at once, I would recommend to use Maurizio's solution. I'm sorry that it wasn't working.
All right, so thank you very, very much, Simon, for not just sponsoring us, but also giving us such an informative testing strategy. So if you guys still have more questions for him, you know where to find him. I heard beer, so.